Welcome. Today we're talking about what meaningful change is for people living with severe neurodevelopmental impairments in the context of developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, or a DEE. My name is Dr. Jessica Keeley, and I work in the Child Disability team at the Kids Research Institute Australia.
And my name is Dr. Jenny Downs, and I am also from the Kids Research Institute Australia. We are also a part of the Inchstone Project, which is an international group of researchers and patient advocates who are working together towards better measurement for children with severe neurodevelopmental impairments. This work is important because with genetic testing advancing so fast, more and more DEE conditions are being identified and new treatments will become available.
And if we want to know if therapies have really made a difference, we need to know what kind of improvements matter most to the people affected.
And this is for families who are managing their child with a DEE every day, for clinicians, for regulatory agencies who are deciding on whether or not to fund new treatments, and for the healthcare sector and insurers in our society who pay for healthcare and need to work out what they will fund.
Our aim today is to tell you about the main findings from our recent study.
We're going to discuss our study published in Developmental Medicine and Child Neurology called Caregiver-reported Meaningful Change in Functional Domains for Individuals with Developmental and Epileptic Encephalopathy, a Convergent Mixed Methods Design. We collected data in a survey of 267 parents with a child with substantial neurodevelopmental challenges, most of whom had a DEE condition.
So, today we will talk about what parent caregivers see as meaningful progress in their child's functional abilities of communication, gross motor function, hand function, and eating, both independently and safely. And maybe even more importantly, why? Why are these specific changes so important in their life? First, can you give us a quick refresher on exactly what DEs are?
DEEs are a growing group of rare genetically caused conditions. They impact how the brain develops, and usually there is epilepsy and seizures. And then the seizures have their own impacts on the child's development. For the child, there may be other challenges also. For example, cortical visual impairment, problems with sleep, GI issues, and behavioural dysregulation.
So, it's a complex picture. Our study used a particular approach to try and understand what meaningful change looks like. We used a convergent mixed methods design.
We collected quantitative and qualitative data where parents described meaningful change for their priority domains and why that would be important. Then we analysed the two types of data separately first, and then we merged them together to get a much richer and fuller picture.
Great. So, looking at the quantitative side first, nearly 80% of parents picked expressive communication as their top priority.
And we used a directed content analysis to code the descriptions of meaningful change. From our coding, the data gave us 86 specific meaningful change codes across the communication, gross motor, hand function, and eating domains.
So, let's consider some examples. For expressive communication, a common code was being able to demonstrate preferences, so showing that the child likes or dislikes something. Another common code was being able to express pain, hurt, or discomfort. Some parents hoped for single words, others for using communication devices effectively, or even the child using their limbs or gestures to communicate. So parents wanted a large range of skills depending on the child.
Definitely. There was a fundamental desire for the child to be able to communicate their needs, their wants, their likes, and their emotions, and to indicate whether they had pain.
Yes, regardless of how severe the other challenges were. This is an example of divergence because it did not appear to be dependent on usual patterns of developmental progression.
And this wasn't the case for gross motor skills, though.
No, for gross motor, the desired changes were very much tied to the child's current abilities. For instance, the kids who could not walk, a goal was often gaining head control or being able to sit independently. Meaningful change was usually different depending on the child's gross motor skills, and this is an example of convergence because it's consistent with the usual pattern of developmental progression.
For eating safely, things like not choking, coughing, or aspirating food, and being able to swallow different textures safely were frequently described as meaningful changes. These safety concerns were mentioned by parents across all levels of eating impairment, and this is another example of divergence. For independence, parents often wished their children could use a spoon or a fork, drink by themselves from a cup, or manage finger food, taking steps towards more autonomy.
For using their hands, a common wish, again, across different levels of ability, was just being able to grasp toys or other objects and being able to push buttons on communication devices or toys. So we've got a clearer picture now of what changes
Mm.
parents hoped for, but we also wanted to know why. Why are these specific
Mm.
changes so important?
The reasons fell into two main groups: benefits for the child and benefits for the family.
Parents felt like the meaningful changes could boost their child's mental health, maybe leading to better behavior. So the child may be less frustrated because they can communicate their needs.
Physically, they hoped for things like better management of, for example, respiratory secretions, less risk of aspiration pneumonia, better hydration if eating and drinking improved.
For more safety.
And for the family, parents expected that meaningful changes in their child's functioning would improve their own mental health. Less worry, less stress, and practically in terms of day-to-day care, they hope to find solutions to problems. For example, needing less bulky equipment, more efficient meal times, and maybe spending less time on direct care tasks, giving them back some time and some energy.
And maybe most profoundly, they talked about family joy and quality of life, being able to truly celebrate their
Mm.
child, finding their voice, or making family outings easier. So, pulling this all together, there are implications for developing and choosing the right tools to measure success in clinical trials and clinical treatments.
This study tells us about important ingredients in assessments for functional abilities to measure change that really matters to families. It also shows that broader measures, such as quality of life measures, are also important to evaluate if the functional changes have impacted how the child and family are living.
So the next step is to consider how can therapies better weave in these diverse caregiver viewpoints? How do we make sure we're truly optimizing the measurement of outcomes based on what actually matters to them?
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for listening.